Tonight, the government back in business after a record-long shutdown, but millions are still struggling. The economic fallout and why another closure could be just weeks away. Plus, the Epstein files, secret emails, serious claims, and new questions for the president. The push on Capitol Hill to release more information. And worship powerhouse John Mark McMillan looks back on decades of ministry, the stories behind the songs, and how they've touched millions.
I felt like God was giving me the songs that I needed, and I thought maybe other people these might be helpful for them.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. After 43 days, the longest government shutdown in history is finally over. Welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. President Trump said it's time to get the country working again as he signed legislation to reopen the government late last night, surrounded by congressional Republicans. The short-term funding bill keeps the government open through January, ensuring back pay for furloughed employees and extending SNAP food benefits. But the bitter partisan divide remains as the two sides continue to battle over health care and prepare a new fight over the Epstein files. Washington correspondent Caitlin Berg is following all of it. Caitlin, with the federal government now officially open again, when can we expect things to get back to normal?
Jenna, the short answer is it depends. SNAP benefits, for example, should be almost immediate, with states expecting funding within 24 hours. Air travel, however, will take longer.
We now have 15 to 20 air traffic controllers retiring a day. So that's a problem. Long after you all finish covering the shutdown, we are going to be stuck dealing with this problem where we're about 2,000 controllers short.
Despite the government reopening, the 6% reduction in commercial flights at 40 major airports remains in place. While further cuts have now been called off, officials say normal operations will not resume until they have enough air traffic controllers to handle it. In a statement, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy saying, quote, "The data is going to guide what we do because the safety of the American people comes first." Meanwhile, with the shutdown over, the fight over health care is only beginning. Democrats promise to keep fighting to extend Obamacare and keep insurance premiums from skyrocketing.
Our promise to the American people is that we are in this fight until we win this fight for all of you. Cancel the cuts, lower the costs, save health care.
In exchange for support on the Republican funding package, Senator John Thune promised 8 Democrats he would hold a vote on the expiring Obamacare subsidies by mid-December. That vote hasn't been scheduled, and House Speaker Mike Johnson hasn't committed to one.
We were always open to sitting down to negotiate and talk through how to reduce healthcare costs. It's a crisis for the American people. The cost have skyrocketed. The Democrat solution is to subsidize the broken system. We would like to go in and look at the root causes of why those costs are so high. What I'm committed to, and I have all along, this has never changed, is a deliberative process that we do in the House.
House Democrats now gearing up for a new battle over the Jeffrey Epstein files, releasing thousands of documents Wednesday, including emails claiming President Trump, quote, knew about the girls, and even spent time with a person they claim was a victim. Trump continues to deny any wrongdoing, and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called this latest release a manufactured hoax.
Now they're talking about it all of a sudden because President Trump is in the Oval Office. But when Joe Biden was sitting in there, the Democrats never brought this up. This wasn't an issue that they cared about because they actually don't care about the victims in these cases. They care about trying to score political points against President Trump.
A House vote is scheduled for next week on a bill that would force the files release. 4 Republicans join Democrats making that vote happen. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you. And here now for more is Victoria Churchill, a political commentator with Young Voices. Victoria, welcome. Great to have you. So let's start with the shutdown. Both sides blaming each other. Victoria, were there any political winners in this?
Well, if you listen to the president and the speech that he made late last night in the Oval Office, he still believes that the Democrats still bear the brunt of the blame for the shutdown. He has called this throughout the entire time of the shutdown, of course, those 43 days. He called it the Schumer shutdown. And actually, it's interesting because other voices on the left, groups like, for example, the College Democrats in both New York and nationwide have called on Schumer to step down. He's faced pressure from other people in his own party, even groups like Our Revolution, which is a more Democrat, socialist, Bernie Sanders aligned type group. They're calling on Schumer to step down because they believe that he is a failed leader, particularly because you had 8 Democrats in the Senate who sided with Republicans to pass this funding package, and then you also had 6 Democrats in the House. And after President Trump signed the bill, he kind of implored the American people to remember the shutdown, again, calling it the Democrat shutdown. He called it upon the American people to remember this come the midterms. And, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best play, because public polling has shown a little bit of the opposite, that more people, at least that have responded to polling, blame Republicans for the shutdown, not Democrats. And I think if we look at the election results just from last week, that also kind of goes to show that when it comes to elections, Democrats might have been a little bit more motivated by this issue to vote against the people who they thought were causing harm.
Yeah, to your point, there are several polls showing President Trump's approval rating is actually taking a hit since the start of the shutdown. Victoria, why do you think that is, and how should the GOP handle this? What should they be talking about moving forward?
Sure. I think it's interesting to point out that polling has obviously never been very favorable to President Trump, and I think that the kinds of people that are more likely to respond to polls are probably people that are more critical versus or more approving. So I think that is one thing to note. But I also think it's interesting to note that a lot of Republicans, particularly even on the House floor yesterday, before they passed this legislation, they were throwing those arrows at their Democrat colleagues. Democrats tried to frame this as Republicans were on vacation because the House, pretty much suspended business throughout the entirety of the shutdown, because the House tried to say, we did our job, we passed this funding package, it got caught up in the Senate. But I think there's definitely a few House Republicans, particularly those that are in vulnerable districts, that are going to be a little bit nervous. I know Virginia is one state that I pay close attention to. I used to cover Virginia politics almost exclusively, and I still keep quite a significant finger on the pulse down there. And we're looking at, for example, the re-entry of Elaine Luria into electoral politics. She's a former congresswoman who got beat out in the Biden midterms by current Representative Jen Kiggans. But it looks like Luria's shaping up for a rematch, and that's a district that swings kind of, in those midterm kind of pendulum shifts that you expect that are to the party that is opposition of the president. Those seats have been picked up. So, that's definitely a district that's really one of those bellwethers that a lot of people are going to be looking at nationally, probably going to be spending quite a bit of time and money there.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake in the 2026 midterms, so we'll see. While I have you here, Victoria, I want to talk about the upcoming vote on the Jeffrey Epstein files. Several Republicans are expected to join Democrats and demand the release of all the materials related to the convicted sex offender. Victoria, is it a bad thing for the White House to see all of this information come to light? And are these congressmen and women taking a risk by joining Democrats?
Well, I think if you looked at some of the reporting that was happening last night, the White House was definitely nervous about this discharge petition, which would be, will be bringing this vote out of committee straight to the House floor. There were, of course, 4 Republicans who sided with Democrats to advance this discharge petition. That's, of course, been Thomas Massie, who's been spearheading it, along with Representatives Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Those have been kind of those focal people, particularly on the Republican side. But we've even seen new representatives. Tim Burchett is one that tried to force the vote right there on the House floor yesterday. He's of Tennessee. He's potentially looking at maybe like a Senate run, so he may not necessarily be kind of thinking about at least a future in the House is his political future. And then Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska, he's of course the one that is talked about quite a bit because Nebraska splits their electoral votes in presidential years. And so the district is always one that's in contention, and he's actually not seeking re-election. So he's another one that doesn't really have a political future to contend with, that may be open to, supporting even those of his colleagues that signed on to the discharge petition. So those are 2 votes definitely to be looking closely at next week.
Yeah, that's a tough district there in Nebraska. It can go either way. All right, Victoria Churchill, commentator with Young Voices. Wonderful to have you. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you so much.
All right, turning now to the Middle East. Reports tonight that Hamas has turned over the body of another hostage in captivity as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal. While Israeli officials work to identify the remains, the White House is raising concerns tonight that the deal could be at risk following rising attacks by Israelis against Palestinians in the West Bank, also called Biblical Judea and Samaria. On Wednesday, Israeli extremists torched and defaced a mosque in an Arab village. Here is Secretary of State Marco Rubio responding to that.
But yes, look, certainly there's some concern about events in the West Bank spilling over and creating an effect that could undermine what we're doing in Gaza. We don't expect it to. We'll do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen.
Israel says the incidents will be dealt with to the full extent of the law. Well, the shutdown may be over, but the financial impact continues. Coming up, a look at the potential economic blowback. While the government shutdown may be ending, experts predict the economic impact of those missed paychecks and layoffs may have a trickle-down effect in the days ahead. Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst at Bankrate, joins us now. Mark, great to have you with us. So let's start with the impact of the shutdown on the economy. What are some of your takeaways, Mark?
It's been estimated, Jenna, good to be with you, that fourth quarter growth may have a subtraction of about 1.5% during those 3-month period, during that 3-month period. And by contrast, the growth for a full year is typically averaging around 2%. So that is a significant hit, but you're expected to make up a good part of that in the first quarter of next year. But let's boil this down to the way it affects everyday Americans. This was an unforced error on the part of elected officials in Washington, causing a great deal of stress for all kinds of people, ranging from food stamp recipients to people who are working in behalf of the American people in the federal government, everything from law enforcement to air traffic controllers. And there were significant problems with the nation's air traffic over the last several weeks, where the airline industry lost millions of dollars because people were either unwilling to fly or they had to keep some planes on the ground. What I would say is that the good news is we'll soon be getting economic reports that we didn't get before. The bad news is we may be getting some economic reports very soon, and they are not expected to look very good. So we'll be happy to have the clarity resulting from the federal statistical data, dubbed by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell as the gold standard in the data realm, but the actual look of that data may be somewhat downbeat as we head into the early part of next year.
Yeah, you alluded to it. The shutdown has caused a delay in some key economic data on things like inflation, which some experts are predicting could impact the Fed's decision to make more interest rate cuts. Mark, what's your prediction there?
Right now, it's a 50-50 bet whether the Fed cuts interest rates with its December 10th announcement, and getting more economic data will be helpful. But the Fed has already cut rates in the last two meetings, 0.25% at both of those. And so it's getting close to the point where it thinks that it essentially has removed restriction from the economy. The question going forward is, will they need to give some medicine to the economy if the job market remains rather lackluster? And that would mean lower interest rates in 2026.
So, of course, thousands of federal workers will be returning to work soon, but we know many have had to take out loans or have fallen behind on bills. And it's not just the federal workers, it's everything that trickles down from that. They're not spending money at the shops and the salons and restaurants. Mark, what's your advice to these people affected by the shutdown in this way, who are trying to recover financially after a month without pay or a significant cut in pay?
Well, the damage has been done, and there's only so much they can do from here. I can tell you from being a resident of the D.C. area myself that some of these people have been driving for Uber, trying to pick up jobs on the side where they can. Jenna, even for a broader audience, essentially everybody watching right now, this really harkens back to something we've been talking about for years at Bankrate, and that is the need to prioritize emergency savings. Because whether it's an interruption in income or employment, whether it's a sudden expense, whether it's life coming at you, the reality is that we do have to pay more during certain periods than we do during others, and the inoculation for that is to have sufficient emergency savings.
Yeah, just a few seconds left, but President Trump, the White House is floating the idea of a 50-year mortgage. I wonder just your thoughts on that in just a few seconds, Mark.
Really speaks to the desperation people have with respect to wanting to resolve the affordability crisis with respect to housing. This isn't the solution. People would essentially be long-term renters if you think about having to pay a mortgage over the course of 50 years to actually own a home.
Yeah, you'd probably die before you end up, paying off that actual loan. All right,
Exactly.
Mark Hamrick with Bankrate, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, a celebrated career and chart-topping hits. Christian artist John Mark McMillan reflects on 20 years of music and the journey ahead. Welcome back. Christian artist John Mark McMillan has written hit songs like How He Loves Us and King of My Heart. He's also traveled the world performing his music, and now he's retiring from life on the road. CBN News recently caught up with the singer on his final tour, and he shared some powerful and personal stories of his career.
John Mark McMillan has written songs and traveled the world singing them for decades.
20 years later, it's been a wild ride.
His long musical journey is also a spiritual one. It began when he was just 7 years old.
When I was 7, I had this weird thing happen at Vacation Bible School.
I was overwhelmed with this feeling and I started to cry.
There's like a guest musical, special music, they used to call it. And out of nowhere, I felt this feeling, right? I felt this feeling, and the only way I can describe it is that it felt like the entire universe was in love with me, and I had compassion on every person I'd ever met in my entire life. And I started to sob, I started to cry, I started to break down. And so I think from then on, I wanted to feel that feeling again, and I found it oftentimes in music. And that's probably why I gravitated towards music, even though I wasn't very good at it growing up.
Good or bad, he couldn't stop.
And I wondered, at some point, if I made music myself, then maybe I could feel that feeling again.
In his teen years, John Mark began creating his own original music.
Initially, I think I started writing songs because I'd played in some bands. And mostly I just liked the community of being in the band. I was never very good. In fact, a lot of people told me I wasn't going to make music.
And in seminary, he was given his first opportunity to take the stage with his very own song.
That was the moment I'm like, I walked off the stage thinking this 5,000 people sang this song the way I felt. It's like, I want to feel this way. And I realized that maybe if I can share that feeling through my music, I could do something that mattered.
Still, one of his most recognized hits. He wrote How He Loves more than 20 years ago after losing a close friend in a car accident.
I'd actually started the song before he passed away. I had a verse, but I played that verse for him. In my mind, it was like the last time I saw him alive. And after he passed away, I decided to finish that song kind of as an homage to him because I knew he liked it. And I'd had people die, lost grandparents and stuff, but losing a young friend was not a thing that was supposed to happen. And so I was, I was bitter that God would take my friend. That I was very tempted to think God's not a loving God if he would allow my best friend to die. And it was saying, I still believe you're a loving God.
Since this song, John Mark has released many chart-topping melodies, most recently, Cosmic Supreme.
The Cosmic Supreme album really happened, it was in a season when my father-in-law was passing away. He was dying. He was fighting cancer. And in that season, life was really, really difficult. My mind started wandering, and while I was supposed to be working, I would start singing these, what I thought were kind of silly, childlike praise choruses. And after my father-in-law passed away, I realized that I felt like God was giving me the songs that I needed, And I thought maybe other people these might be helpful for them.
Now, taking more time to look back, he embraces every area of his life, the tragedies and the triumphs.
It's been a wild ride. But at 45, I also realized the world is a lot more complex than I thought it was at 7.
Certain things that were painful, but I don't know that I would be who I am right now if I hadn't walked through all of that. In one sense, if Jesus is the image of the invisible God, and Jesus is the God who embraces helplessness as a child, who embraces hard work as an adult, and then he embraces, death. If he's the God who embraces all those things, then also taking up the cross is also embracing my whole story, even the parts of it that I don't like. If Jesus embraces my whole story, then I can also embrace my whole story, and I can look back without shame, and I can be okay with whatever it was. And that is the cosmic supreme.
I want you to know how much I appreciate you and how much purpose and meaning you have given me over these last 20 years. Thank you so much.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Thank you, Ephraim. And still ahead, an emotional striking of the last penny. Finally tonight, it's the end of an era for the United States penny. After more than 230 years, the production of our least denomination coin is coming to an end. When it was introduced in 1793, a penny could purchase a snack or a piece of candy. Now, though, in 2025, the copper coin costs more to produce than it's actually worth at nearly 4 cents a coin. U.S. Treasurer Brandon Beach says the halt in penny production will save taxpayers an estimated $56 million. But for those feeling nostalgic, the coin isn't disappearing completely and will still remain legal currency.
It's emotional. 232 years of history. The penny's been struck for that many years at the mint. And it made up around 44% of our production for the last 15 years. So it's an emotional day. I think everybody's going to feel that.
And the last few pennies were produced and auctioned off at the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.